Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Emily and welcome to the Astro Library. So we're in my living room. I have my witch hat and today we are going to be ranking every series I've ever read and completed. So we got quite the video today. I think I have at least 15 series. I don't know the exact number, but I've read quite a few series, more than I actually thought I did, at least from start to finish. We're not going to talk about all the series I haven't finished. There'll be another video where you can see all of my shame. But today we are ranking the ones that I have completed and I have thoughts on. I've actually posted the teaser of my tier rankings that I'll post in one of these spaces next to me. But let's go ahead and just dive straight in and see what my thoughts are on these series. Some of them I haven't thought about in years, so this will be fun. These are my categories. So I have Sell My Soul to Read It Again for the first time, Lives in My Head Rent Free, Made Me Go Feral, Liked It but Didn't Love It, Honestly Forgettable, and Throw It in the Garbage. Those are my categories, and we're just gonna go ahead and get straight in and sorting these out. So the very first one I have is Woman Worth 10 Copper series by Morgan Howell, I think it was. Now I haven't read this series in a really long time. Like, I'm talking, I read this back when I was really still reading mostly on my Kindle rather than physically, and I had grabbed off of like a Kindle first, and it's like a stereotypical fantasy romance where we have this girl who is a slave who is bought for 10 copper, and she ends up being this like prophet type character. I remember reading the series and absolutely devouring this first book. But as soon as it got to the other two, because it's a trilogy, I don't remember liking it as much. I remember not enjoying the second book nearly as much as the third, and I think the third book was okay. So I'm going to drop this in Honestly Forgettable just because it's been so long since I've read this series and it doesn't stick out in my mind other than I enjoyed it, which is kind of the category for Honestly Forgettable. Like, it was great in the moment, but it was nothing that was going to stick around for a long time. After that, I have the Becca Cooper series by Tamora Pierce. Now this is a book that I adored. I read this first, I believe in like middle school, and it's about this girl who is like training to become a police officer, which were known as like the Dogs or something. Tamora Pierce is just like one of those writers that sticks with you. And so Becca Cooper to this day still lives in my head rent free. I think about Becca all the time, especially because Becca had really long hair, which she knew was a really big hazard for her job, but she liked it so much. So what she would do is she would braid a spike in her braid. And so if people grabbed her hair, they would like be punished for that. And that lives in my head rent free. I think of every character who's had long hair in fantasy like doing something like that because that was just so realistic. Honestly, what an icon. So she lives in my head rent free. That series lives in my head rent free. It's one of my very first fantasy series I remember diving into, and just again one of those core books that really shaped my reading taste for what it is today. After that, I have another favorite, and that is the Hepdale Rain series by Cindy Paul. You've heard me talk about this book ad nauseum. This is something I would sell my soul to read again for the first time. I adore everything Cindy has ever written, but this series in particular was just such a fun time, and I loved getting to know each and every one of these characters and just getting lost in this world and seeing all the pretty art for the first time. I would sell my soul to read this for the first time again. After that, we have the Bargainer series by Laura. I don't know her last name. I will insert that right here. But the Bargainer series, which is another fantasy romance series, kind of a portal romance series if we're being honest, because we do kind of like, or the series takes place like half in the Fae realm. I love the series. This series is definitely going in the Made Me Go Feral. The only reason why it doesn't live in my head rent free is because it's a very like smut heavy series, which I liked, but it's not my favorite thing to read all the time. But I devoured this series, and like any person who's like seriously into their like smutty romance era, this is one of the first books I recommend to them because the plot's only really good, but the smut is mwah, chef's kiss. It is so perfect, so absolutely perfect, and I was feral for these characters. I love the siren aspect. I love the bargainer as a character and just like a concept. I think it was really cool. Oh, feral. Absolutely feral. I want to actually collect these books physically because I only have the series in its e-version, and I think physically I only own the first book, but Love the series. Okay, this next book. Everyone's read it, okay? If you were a teenage girl, you read this book because this was the book we all read, and that is Twilight. We're gonna throw Twilight in the garbage, okay? We've evolved past it, okay? Twilight was fun, it's a meme, but objectively, Twilight is awful. Like, god awful. So we're going to throw Twilight in the garbage because honestly, it belongs there. Both Edward and Jacob are trash, and Bella is no prize to fight over. So we're gonna leave it in the garbage for where it belongs. I'm nervous about this next one. So next we have The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater. You might cancel me for this. You might never watch a video of mine again. And honestly, that'd be fair. But I'm gonna leave it in liked it but didn't love it. Now wait, don't come for me yet. I adored the first 3 books of this series. But the last one? Oh my god, I can't even tell you how wild that last book was. And when I tell you, it read like a fever dream fan fiction. It felt like everything was going too fast and made no sense. And I was just so taken aback by the book that it really left a sour taste in my mouth for that series because it felt like everything we were building up in the first 3 books just kind of fell apart in this last book. It's honestly what made me not continue on the spin-off series with Ronan, even though Ronan was one of my favorite characters in the Raven Cycle. I was so let down by that last book and just so angry by some of the choices made in the last book that I never picked it up, and it made the series fall so much flatter for me than it would have otherwise. After that, we have the Grave of Empire series by Sam Sykes, another series I've talked about ad nauseum on this channel. So you already know it is, I would sell my soul to read it for the first time again because, oh my god, if I could meet Sal the Cacophony again for the first time, if I could read that last book for the first time again, I need to read more Sam Sykes because the way that man had me gripped in his world, I need more of it. I need more of it. So I would sell my soul again to read it. After that, we have another series that made me go absolutely feral, but is actually a series that lives in my head rent-free, and that is the All for the Game trilogy by Nora Sakavic. I don't know how to explain that series. It's a buck wild series that anytime I try to explain it, you either A, spoil something, or B, sound like a fucking lunatic. But that is just a series that like occupied my head for such a long time after I read it. And I've read this series start to finish at least 4 or 5 times because it's just one of those books that like require you to read again and again to like catch everything. Not in it that it's like complicated, just that there's a lot going on and that you catch something new or like catch a clue earlier on than you did for the first time. It's so good. You know, I take the back. I don't know if I can say it's good. It's such a provoking series is the least of what I could say. I still think about Neil and Andrew to this day. I do. At least once a day. I think about them and the stories I still want to write about them, even though I haven't read this book in a few years now. All right, next up I have the Nevernight Chronicles by J. Kristoff. I am going to put this in Made Me Go Feral because I really, really liked this series, but there were moments where it hit like big lulls. So it took me a while to finish the first book, and the second book took me forever to get into until it hit that like jump starting point where everything just started getting really fast paced. We started getting more into the plot and figuring out where this kind of fit in with the rest of the story. And once it hit that point, like I was fucking feral for it and I devoured these books. But they did have these lull moments that kind of pushed it from living my head rent free. After that, we have A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. This is a beloved series. I don't know how I found this series, but I remember reading this first book and then giving it to my mom to read. And she also, and like we would like buy the books and trade it off who got to read what first. And it's a series that I actually had to hunt down the first book to buy again, which was ridiculous, by the way. So hard to find the first book in hardback. Where would I put this? There were moments where I was like feral for this series. Like I absolutely loved it. But by the time we got to books 2 and 3, I think I tempered it where I really liked it, but I didn't love it. You know, in fact, I'll put it at the top of this category because it's almost totally made me go feral, but the second book in particular, I think, drags it down, at least for me as a reader, because we go back in time, and I just really wasn't, like, super interested. But overall, I remember loving the first book, and I still love and, like, remember the events of the first book. So it's a highlight, but didn't love it. Next, we have Air Awakens. Oh my god, Air Awakens. Okay, so Air Awakens is a series by Elise Kova, who is really known for her A Deal of Marriages series. The first book, I believe, is, like, A Deal with the Elf King, or A Marriage to the Elf King, which got really popular on like Book Talk and BookTube as this like fantasy romance series as like a one-off. But the series that got me into Elise Kova was her Air Awakens series. And this is something I would sell my soul to read again for the first time, because this influenced so much of my own writing and what I just loved in characters. I can't imagine my reading taste without this book in it. Consistently, this series just like hit everything I wanted it to. We got a badass female, we got a dark and mysterious kind of an asshole male lead, we got political intrigue, we got magical powers. It was perfect. And I love the ending to the series, and I would sell my soul to read this for the first time again. Next, I have the Selection series by Kiera. We're gonna throw it in the garbage. Almost too honestly forgettable. This series is marketed as like the Hunger Games meets The Bachelor, and I guess in the sense of like Hunger Games is dystopian, it's very much The Bachelor. The Bachelor set in a dystopian setting, and that's all you get from the Hunger Games. It's kind of weird, and it was fun to read in like COVID when we were all in quarantine and everyone was talking about this book just as like an escapism type of thing. But it's not good because I think there's 3 books, and then there's 2 books in like a spin-off series that follows the daughter of the main character. And like 3 books and I was good. Like I didn't want to read any more of this series. We're just gonna have to throw it in the garbage because it's not great. It's fun. If you ever want a series where you just want to turn your brain off, The Selection is the one to go with. After that, we have the Blood Gift duology, I think it's called. And this is by N.E. Davis, I think. The first book's The Blood Trials, and the second book is The Blood Gift. And we're gonna throw this in the garbage straight away because I was so excited for this series because it was marketed as like a Red Rising type of book, but make it black. And the first chunk of the first book, the majority of the first book, I would say was pretty damn good. I definitely saw the Red Rising elements. It wasn't as brutal as Red Rising as like it tried to make itself out to be, but it was still compelling and interesting, and I liked the main character. But by the end of the first book, the main character was so fucking annoying and just making the stupidest mistakes for no reason. Like the dumbest fucking mistakes, and make these really big leaps in logic that just didn't really make sense in terms of like her character, and she kind of like whined a lot. And for a book that was marketed as a adult book, it was very YA feeling, and the main character just was so annoying. But then after that, this book, top of my I would sell my soul to read again. This is the Captive Prince trilogy by C.S. Pacat. Oh my god. Oh my, I've talked about this series. I have multiple times. And I will say it again. It is the best enemies to lovers romance you will ever read. Like, I'm talking, you read that first book, you're like, how the fuck did these two ever end up in love? And then by the end of the third book, it's the most beautiful love story you've ever read. Chef's kiss. I would sell everyone's soul to read that book again for the first time. It was so good. Yes, okay. Sell my soul to read again for the first time. So the next series I have here is the Sammy Keys series, which is a series I've talked about on my channel as being like the series to kickstart my reading journey. And just because of that, it lives in my head rent-free. I would not be here without Sammy Keys and Wendelin Van Draanen, who wrote this beautiful and fun story about a quirky little girl solving mysteries in her hometown. And I owe a lot to Sammy Keys, and it forever holds a place in my heart. And I'll never forget about it. I look at it on my shelf every day and just smile because that's where it started. So of course it lets my head rent free. Now next, lover or hater, Sarah J. Maas is on this list. Throne of Glass used to be my, like, sell my soul to read again for the first time. It is since dropped down. Not because I hate the series at all, or I don't think Sarah J. Maas is a bad writer. I don't. The woman sold millions of copies of her books, and there's a reason why she's so famous. I adore the Throne of Glass series. I had so much fun reading it. It is a series that I think about quite often as a kind of architecture for what I'm looking for in a fantasy series with a female lead, and that is lengthy. I like to see my plots really developed and have moments from book one be very important for later on in the series, and kind of getting to piece those out and just seeing the like wide cast of characters. Sarah J. Maas knows how to tell a story. She does. There's a reason why she's a New York bestselling author and why her books are so widely loved, because the woman can tell a story and tells it in a very compelling way. And even when it's ridiculous, it still has you gripped. And that's what Throne of Glass is for me. It is a series that had me gripped and still kind of has me gripped, even though I recognize and acknowledge all the flaws are in it. It's not the perfect series, but it's a series I loved at the time and I still really enjoy when I think about it just as a pure form of entertainment. Next up, I have a series I actually talked about recently on my channel, and that is the OSI novel series by Jes Battis, which is a paranormal romance series. I'm gonna make this in Made Me Go Feral because I had read this first book, didn't know it was a series, and was so fucking mad that it was what a perceived single book because I wanted so much more from it. But then it wasn't until like years later that I found out that there was more books that I immediately went out and bought all of them. Definitely a series that made me go absolutely feral. Next up I have is War Prize by Elizabeth Vaughan, and we're just gonna drop this and lives in my head rent free because I love this series. In fact, I had to rebuy the first book because someone had borrowed it and lost it, probably kept it for themselves, to be honest. So I just had to buy another copy because everyone loved this one and it was so hard to like keep a copy in my own library. After that, we have The Vampire Academy by Richelle Mead. This is definitely the superior vampire series to Twilight, okay? Does that still stand to today's standards? No. Like, if I were to read the series now, I would probably throw it in the garbage right alongside Twilight. But from pure nostalgia, this series made me go fucking feral. With the caveat of, I have not read them since I was in high school. And if I did go back and read them, it would probably sink to the trash level. But for pure nostalgia's sake, it's gonna go in the Made Me Go Feral because I devoured those books, okay? Unrepentantly devoured those books. After that, I have The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson, or also known as the Millennium series. But either way, we're dropping this in the I would sell my soul to read this for the first time again because I don't know what came first. If I read the book or I saw the movie, particularly the American version of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which is my preferred version. I love the movie so much. I went and I read the books, but I love these books. And I actually really enjoy the continuation trilogy done by David Lagercrantz, who picked up the series after Stieg Larsson died. And I was really wary that he was going to not really like capture the characters that I love so much in the best light, but he actually did a really good job. And I was thoroughly surprised at how much I enjoyed the continuation series. And I'm glad I did because I did get to finish up like the meaning behind her dragon tattoo, which was the kind of big hidden one that was teased at in the third book but never fully developed and think about constantly and really just stuck with me as a reader. The next book I have is the Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer. I love this series. This is my one of my favorite sci-fi series. So I think I'm going to put it in Lives in My Head rent free. I would say probably after Becca Cooper, but above War Prize and Sammy Keys. Because this is one of the series that I just think about as the archetype of what I want in a sci-fi series. So something that is really fun and enjoyable, but also very approachable, because sci-fi has this tendency of wanting to exclude a lot of people. And while it's getting better over the years and in scholarship, it still suffers from that problem of being so sci-fi that it's intimidating or boring and dragging, versus the Lunar Chronicles was so fucking easy to get into and just so much fun. And I really loved all the characters and getting to see the world develop through the multi-perspective, as well as the continued development of our main characters from book one. The next series I have here is the Eon and Iona series by Alice Guzman, I think.
Hello, Editor Emily here. I was so very wrong on who that author was.
The actual author is Alison Goodman, not some weird kind of combination of Alice Oseman, you know, the author of Heartstopper, and Guzman, who even knows where that came from. Anyways, back to the video. This is a series that has come under controversy in the last few years just because it is a white woman writing about Chinese ancestry with our main character. So I read this in high school, I want to say, and I really enjoyed it. For a duology, I feel like it packs quite a lot in, and it delivers a pretty complex story that feels complete by the end of the second book. But other than that, I really couldn't tell you anything about this series other than there was dragons and a main character who was pretending to be a boy for the first book and then reveals that she's a girl and a badass in the second book. But other than that, that's all I remember. I remember it was a good time, but it's honestly pretty forgettable. Now, it's funny we're pairing that with the other dragon series that I read as a kid and just like adored, which was Aragon. And this is a series I would love to say made me go feral, but it just misses the mark, particularly in the last book of the series so this series starts single perspective where we're only following our main character Aragon, but by the end of the series and the fourth book, we are getting into so many different perspectives that I lost interest so heavily in those other perspectives. In fact, I think in the last book I skipped chunks of pages because I just didn't care about the perspective it dumped me in. Honestly, for being realistic, I skipped half of that book because I didn't care about the perspective of his cousin and the human fight story. I just wanted to follow the dragons and the magic portion of the series. So I loved the series. I did at the time, but if I'm being honest with myself, I didn't love it. I just really enjoyed it, which is kind of why it ends in the middle of the road. The next series we have is the Carry On trilogy, or I think it's a Simon Snow trilogy. I think it's actually what it's called, by Rainbow Rowell. This is a mixed series for me because I really liked the first book. I didn't quite enjoy the second book. It took me forever to read it. And then the third book was okay. So I think that puts it in, I liked it, but I didn't love it. It's tied to another series I really like, the Fangirl series. But it kind of just falls apart in the last two books of the series, even though it does something I was really interested in. I think still a really great premise, in that the first book is the Chosen One story, and books 2 and 3 is what happens to the Chosen One after they fulfilled their destiny. And it's kind of dealing with the sense of being lost and not knowing what you're supposed to do after you fulfill your role, and what do you make of your life after that. And I think it handles that aspect really well, but that kind of meandering just dragged the book down a bit for me. I liked it, but I didn't love it. I love the covers though. If we're talking color covers alone, those live in my head rent free because they're just so fucking pretty. We have Check Please. I love Check Please. This is something that lives in my head rent free. Almost sell my soul to read it again, but I feel like this is one of those things I don't have to read again for the first time to really enjoy it. It is something that I feel like I can come back to and really, really enjoy no matter how many times I've read it and how much I know of the series. It's just so heartwarming. I never thought I would be a sports romance person until Check Please, which definitely kind of opened the door to me reading other sports romances. It's a cute little comic. It's only 2 volumes, but it's such a sweet story and I highly recommend it. After that, we have the Renegade series by Marissa Meyer. I would say this is definitely a series I would sell my soul to read again for the first time, because where the Lunar Chronicles was really accessible and really fun, Renegades made me really think about the series. I really got invested in it. And it's a series I actually didn't necessarily want to read because it was dealing with superheroes. And it's not until I finally caved and bought and read the first book that I realized how much I was missing. And I bought the second book and devoured it. And then pre-ordered the third book so I could read it as soon as it came out. And it was, oh my god. It's one of those series that just constantly make you think about the duality of hero and villain and how they essentially create each other and how one cannot exist without the other. And by following the series through the perspective of a villain was really, really compelling and just made the story so much better in my opinion. So I would sell my soul to read it again for the first time. 10 out of 10 recommend. Okay, Six of Crows. Another one that might get me canceled, but I liked it but didn't love it. And that's just because I've talked about this, but me and Lee Bardugo, I don't know what it is, but just me and her writing just don't get along. We never have. I hated Shadow and Bone, which is the series everyone adores. And I've tried to read Ninth House at least 6 times, never made it past the first few pages. I don't know. I don't know what it is about her writing, but it's just not for me. Six of Crows I did enjoy quite a bit, mainly in the first book. The second book kind of lost me, and I probably wouldn't have finished it if I didn't already know what happened for the most part and wanted to see how it was originally written. But other than that, it was just okay. Ooh, next we have a great one, and that is Written in Red. And this is definitely a series that made me go feral. I think about the series quite often as it was just like this really unique concept where we have humans are no longer the top of the food chain, and just like getting to like see this world and really get to dive deep into its lore, because every book goes deeper and deeper, which is so good. I devoured these books. Okay, then we have the Rose and the Dagger series by Renee Ahdieh, or The Wrath and the Dawn, I think is the series name. And this is a series I'm gonna also put it in made me go feral, because I loved these two books, and I read the first one because of Amazon first. I was so obsessed with it that I was almost afraid to read the second book because I didn't want it to ruin how much I loved the first book. But I actually met a friend in grad school who told me like, okay, the second book is as good as the first, so I finally did it, and I'm really glad I did, because both books are really good and are as good as each other, and I feel like wrap up the series in a great way. I actually gave these books to my mom to read too, and she really enjoyed them, so just so you know, it's good. This is another book that's a booktube and book talk favorite, and that is the Kingdom of the Wicked series by Carrie Maniscalco. And don't get mad, I'm gonna throw it in the garbage, because the first book was fun. I really liked it. I thought it was entertaining. I really liked the romance between the two, but every book after just got like progressively worse. Stupidly worse. I couldn't find myself attached to the characters. I didn't care anymore. I thought they were making dumb decisions. So by the time I finished that third book, I was so ready to be done with the series and never pick it up again. And I maintained that stance. It just got so bad after the first book. The first book was fun and good, and then I don't know what happened. Every book just after just like fell apart more and more, and it lost the sense of fun and like silliness of the first book. So I'm gonna throw it in the garbage. Not as hardly as I'm gonna throw The Blood Trials, because that was infuriating. This book was just bad. All right, and our last book is the Ugly series by Scott Westerfield. Now, nostalgia alone would have me throw it in Sell My Soul to read it for the first time, because it's again one of those series that really shaped my reading taste and just made me super interested in sci-fi and dystopian. But I have reread this series since, and as much as I would love to just discount that, it has definitely dropped it to lives my head rent-free. I think about this series quite often, and particularly its depictions of the future, but it's not great. If I'm being completely honest, like the series itself has its flaws because it was written so long ago, and it feels dated, and it feels a little bit like not like other girls kind of, which we are not doing anymore in 2023, as we shouldn't. But I still really like the series. I think it was a lot of fun. I think the depictions of the future are so cool, and I still think about, and I even really loved the spin-off novel Extras, which is something I don't normally do. I still really like that. I think about Tally as a character all the time, and just like her journey of becoming who she was. Okay, but that's all the books I have. This is the final rating system, and I think I did pretty good. It's a spread. There weren't too many series I would say were honestly forgettable, and not that many series that like I hated and never want to think about again. But yeah, these are all the series I read, and every single one of the books on this list are completed series. So that is something you can take in mind. And if any of these series sounded good to you, I'll have them listed in the description down below, so you can give them a chance. But that is all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun filming it. Leave me a comment down below letting me know which of these series you've read, or where you would maybe place some of the series on this list in a different spot if you read them and you liked them or you hated them. I'm not going to be offended. You can judge these series to your heart's desires. But that is all for me. If you liked this kind of content and you want to see more videos with me, please consider subscribing. I release a video every week, and it's been so much fun creating videos for you guys. But that's it for me. I'm going to go turn on my AC because it is so hot and I just need to cool down a little bit. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!